Hey all, it's Jess from Sunflower Day, and as you can see, the garden, the trellises, they're not green anymore. A lot of things are looking brown, and you're not seeing all the stuff that's usually in here. At least it's not alive anymore. So I had to say goodbye to the warm weather garden because we got our freeze. So the tomatoes and peppers and cucamelons and sweet potatoes and all the other warm weather crops, they're gone. So it's time to clean out the warm weather crops in the garden. So let's get started. So if you're taking out the stuff in your garden, you want to make sure that you remember what your plants did. So how did they do? Did they produce well? Did they get any kind of disease or pest damage? So if they got disease or pest damage, you want to remember that. And if you have any kind of journal, like garden journal, I recommend getting a garden journal if you don't have one, and writing down how your plants did, if they got any kind of disease, if they had a pest, also how they produced, if you liked that kind of variety of plant that you grew. So it's good to write that stuff down, because next year or a couple years from now, you'll be like, I remember growing that, but I don't remember how it did. And it's kind of nice to go back and look in your notes. So when you're thinking about how your plant did, if you're remembering that there was pest damage or disease on your plant, then you want to, a lot of people, they just go ahead and compost everything, but you want to remember about your plant if it had disease or pest damage, because if it did, you don't want to be putting that back into your compost pile, because that's going to go right back into your soil, and then that could potentially happen again the following year if it's in your compost. And also, if there's anything else in your compost that you didn't really want in there, then that's going to be a problem. So you want to be keeping track of your plants. So my tomato plants this year had really bad blight, the worst blight they've ever gotten. I barely ever have blight on my tomato plants, but this year we had so much rain. It just rained and rained like crazy this year. So that's usually something I don't deal with tomatoes, but this year I did. So the tomato plants are not going in the compost. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut them down, and they're going to be put somewhere else that's not near the garden or in the compost bin. I had a really good go with the tomatoes. I'm really happy with them. They did really good this year. I was looking at the neighboring gardens in my area. I noticed that a lot of other people's tomato plants died way sooner than mine did. The blight just took their tomato plants right out, as mine actually lived up into the freeze. So I'm super glad with how the tomato plants did, considering. This is when I'm super happy that I plant fall crops, because when this happens to the warm weather crops, then the garden doesn't look so empty when I clean it out. Because right here I have, if you can see these white flowers, I have, this is called alyssum, and this is in the brassica family, and it's a flower that is really good for covering the actual ground or soil of your garden beds. So it actually grows around your plants, so it doesn't actually choke out your plants. So you can plant this in here with other plants, and you're not going to have to worry about it taking over your plants or taking the nutrition from your plants or choking them out, because it's going to actually grow around your other plants. So it's good for covering the garden bed when you take other stuff out. That way you're not getting grass seed and other stuff growing up in your garden beds. You actually have a ground covering, and this is cold hardy as well, so because it is in the brassica family. All right, one garden bed done. A lot more to go, but I am going to go ahead and clean off a trellis over here, so let's go do that. I have to say, I was really sad to see this cucamelon trellis gone. It was really beautiful. It filled out really well. It was a really beautiful green trellis. Made a nice archway. And this was the first year that I grew the cucamelons, and I loved them. I'm always going to grow cucamelons every year if I can, because they're a fun little thing to grow, and they're great for if you're coming out to the garden or you're having company over and you're walking through the garden. You can just grab a few cucamelons as a snack, and it's a really fun thing. And they're really cool because, you know, they look like little miniature watermelons, so that's super fun. And they take a bit to get going, but once they do, they grow like crazy. And if you keep picking the cucamelons, then it keeps producing. I had cucamelons as soon as this vine started flowering. I had cucamelons all the way up to the freeze, so I was super happy with that. And I also grew the cucamelons in the greenhouse, and they did super well in there. I noticed that they really do like the greenhouse better though, because as soon as I planted them in the greenhouse, they took off. They just literally started growing like crazy. It took a little longer out here for them, but overall they did really well out here, so I'm super happy with that. So this next gardening season, I think I'm gonna So I started Cucumber melons from seed. I think I'm going to start them a little sooner this coming year, so that, at least for the ones out here, so that they can grow a little bit faster, because I would like them to fill out the trellis a bit faster, because it really wasn't until October that they really filled out the trellis. So I'm thinking that's what the game plan is for that, because I'd kind of like for most of the summer for this trellis to be filled out pretty well. And it seems like these don't get like the cucumber beetle like actual cucumbers do. So it seems like they do better that way. Because like I said, they were pretty much thriving up until the freeze. So, and my actual cucumbers, they were done a long time ago. All right, y'all, I'm going to finish up cleaning up the garden. But thank you for coming along with me, cleaning out the garden and saying goodbye to the warm weather crops. But here's to the cold weather crops. We're going to have a good while for the cold weather crops up until they're covered. So we still have a lot of garden tours for a while. All right, all. Thank you for watching. Have a blessed day.